Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
Hello to anyone who's listening via the Temple Beth Am podcast series. First, I want to introduce those who have not met. This is Austin Clark, who will be one of our rabbinic interns for next year. I think an email is coming out today or tomorrow introducing him. Transferring from JTS to Ziegler, and is in LA for the summer, and he'll be around, so get used to him.
Welcome to Los Angeles and Beth Am.
Can you repeat his name?
We tell our interns in the process that we're a kind community. So if you can, pretend for a little bit, he'll eventually see how the sausage is made, but temporarily show him some chesed.
Well, it starts with the question of what kind.
Smicha is actually a kind of.
That kind, exactly.
Rabbi, can you repeat his name?
Austin Clark.
Welcome to Temple Beth Am.
There was a great Notre Dame basketball player named Austin Carr, by the way.
Yes. Yes.
So, but Austin Carr had a significantly better tan than Austin Clark, so.
Okay, let's jump into it. We finished the verse, but did not yet read the Rashi in chapter 12, verse 19. So let me read the verse to get us started.
Rabbi.
Yeah?
Hi. You sound like you're at the bottom of a barrel. I know you're at the end of the table, but it really sounds like you're at the end of the table. So just saying.
Is everyone hearing me that poorly?
Ditto for me.
Yeah, yes.
I hear you fine.
And we hear you fine.
Well,
It might be something with your computer then. Is this any better, Rick?
I'm turning my hearing aids up.
Is this any better? Rick?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
That was a second ago, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting me know. Let me read the verse. We are in verse 19, and verse 19 and 20, you'll see, depending on which book you're looking at, are the last two verses of the Aliyah. And it's a break. It's also the last two verses of the kind of section, because there's a parsha break after verse 20. And it's also the last two verses of this kind of, this is going to be an anachronistic term, but a halachic interlude about how Pesach is going to be observed in generations. Once we get to verse 21, we're back in the story. So we'll see how far we get actually today. It actually might be elegant if we end today with verses 19 and 20, and then we resume in July, we'll actually go back to our regularly scheduled programming. Okay, now I'm hearing an echo. Okay. Shiv'at Yamim, for 7 days. Sa'or, lo yimatzei bevatechem. Good morning, Sandy. A leavening agent, sourdough starter. Not chametz, but the thing that creates chametz. We've already established that in the Torah, the word sa'or, whose etymology we're not 100% sure about, is a synonym, a true synonym to machmetzet. Machmetzet is the noun formed from the verb to ferment, right? The thing that ferments. Sa'or is just a noun. That means the same thing. Lo yimatzei b'vatechem, so you shall not be able to have any leavening agents in your house, as opposed to not just chametz. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning.
Ki, 4, kol ochel machmetzet, anyone who eats that machmetzet, which again is the same thing as sa'or, b'nichrata hanefesh hahi, that person's entirety will be cut off, not just for the eating of chametz, but for the eating of the thing that produces chametz. Me'adat Yisrael, from the congregation of Israel. And then we had this, we talked about this last week, the weirdness of the preposition of the ba of bager and be'ezrach. Most people understand it as kind of hearkening back to whom this rule applies to. Whether it's a stranger who does it or another kind of resident citizen of the land, it applies to them as well. Okay? We could spend more time on the pure pshat, but unless there's like a raging question, I want to jump to the Rashi. I don't have a raging question, so I know it's a high threshold. Okay, it's just before raging, keep it in. I'm kidding. Anyone, any comments or questions on the pasuk? Marshall, do you usually wear a Dodgers kippah?
No, this is a JA, some name it's for the kids.
I'm not opposed. I just normally don't think of you as a Dodgers kippah wearing kind of Jew.
It's a fake one, it's a kid.
I used to make my annual pilgrimage to 162nd Street.
161st and River Avenue. Rick, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. It just struck me a little bit. It says you shouldn't find any. It doesn't say there shouldn't be any. It just says you shouldn't find any, as if you were looking for it. So if you don't look for something, you don't find it. So is this one of the roots of looking for it with the feather and all that? So you can find something, or is this not related to that at all?
I would say sort of. I think you're right. The language is shall not be found, which you could read hyper precisely as, therefore, as long as you search for it and don't find it, you haven't violated the principle. But that's kind of like a schnooky way of looking at the verse. In terms of the search for chametz before Pesach begins, I'm not sure if that is there just because it makes sense or because of the fact that there is language in the Torah about finding. I don't know. It's a good question. I haven't thought about it. But I think the impact of this is your house should be so rid of this that no matter how much you searched, you didn't find. Not that it can be there as long as you don't successfully locate it, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Rebecca, please.
My cleaning easier.
I'll just push back and say Nimtza is also exists, right? Ani Nimtza b'cheder. It's not that I'm found in the room. So I don't know if in general, in this part of the Chumash, this word was used only for found or only for existed.
Yeah.
But
it works in English as well, right? You can speak formally, I will be found there. Doesn't mean that someone's going to search me and find me, but it means I will be there, right? So it's almost a synonym for the verb to be. Very good in both languages. Barry.
So it shouldn't be eaten. And if it is eaten, then there's a result. But it's found. There's no result if it's found. The only result is if it's eaten.
Well, the result is that you're chayav karet. That you off from the
karet is from eating.
You might think that the only thing for which you would be cut off would be the consumption of it. This verse is saying even it's being found, which is why we rid our houses of it.
Oh,
we got to know here.
it's a question of whether it's ochel or
Is that
ochel.
on? You have it on? Okay.
Is it ochel or ochel? Is it
It's ochel. It's
so Barry's right. It's only the act of eating that causes the nichrata.
in this verse. Yeah. But look. Shivat yamim so'or lo yimad. Oh, in terms of the punishment.
Yeah.
Right. So in terms of the punishment, if you use the etnachta of the verse as a fulcrum, for 7 days it can't be found. That's a clear thou shalt not. And yes, it does seem to suggest that the punishment is in the consumption of it. But let's wait till we get to verse 20, and because verse 19, 20 are kind of a pair. Rebecca?
this is a joke. I think that if it's found, it's eaten. So if you find the bread, you will eat it.
That's the assumption. I want to read for the people in the room what Bobby wrote on the chat. May I read that, Bobby? You sent it to me privately. May I read that out loud? Well, I'm not going to read it out loud unless I get confirmation. Write in the chat if you want me to read that out loud or not.
Sorry, I just parked my car. Yes, you can read it out loud. I didn't want to distract from the group. So.
Bobby wrote, my learning this morning is dedicated to our 7-year-old nephew, Jacob Levin Mordechai ben Rachel, his sister's son, who is currently in Boston undergoing a day-long procedure on his head to treat a cavernous malformation. Refuah Shlema to your nephew. He's been in our tefillot for a long time. Bobby, we're thinking of your entire family.
Amen.
Okay, Larry, Diane, and then we're going to read a Rashi.
Okay, I hope Izzy's going to let me make the comment. So we weren't here last week. I'm sorry. Did you discuss the in the verse last week the idea about whether only citizens and strangers will be cut off and what that means? Or are we getting to that?
We discussed that this seems to include citizens and strangers, not that.
Okay. Okay, so I'll make my comment now.
Ger and Ezracha Aretz. First of all, whatever they mean, they don't mean what we might think they mean now. Ger is not a convert, but this is an expansion of those who are great. To which someone, I forgot who said, why would it matter if you're just a Ger or just an Ezracha Aretz to have karet? You're hanging out temporarily with this clan, but it's not like you have done what a modern person would do, which would be convert. Why is that so problematic? Which again raises the question is, what is even karet such that we're so scared of that boogeyman? But mostly this is thought of as an expansion of who's liable, not a focusing on who's liable.
Well, the comment I was going to make is many years ago, when we were living in Israel, there was some controversy, which probably continues to this day, about whether any stores should be able to sell chametz or not sell chametz. And although I'm usually pretty liberal about most of these issues, my feeling at the time was, like Yom Kippur, where the entire country shuts down, so that everybody has solidarity with the practice of at least not driving. There's hardly a car on the street on Yom Kippur in Israel. Even to the extent that people will stone cars that are driving. It seemed to me, and still seems to me, that even for secular Jews to participate in the practice of, at the very least, not eating bread, some minimal observance, is showing some solidarity. So I know it's not the intent of this verse, but this verse gives me comfort in my view that there's some minimal level of practice, not only by Jews, but also by people who are living in the society for those 7 days.
Yeah, just notice the circularity there. I mean, I have sympathy for that perspective, but there's a minimum level of expectation for even those who are not fully obligated by the law, as commanded by a text that the people who don't feel commanded by don't feel should inform them at all, right? So, like from our perspective, who venerates this text, it feels good to know that the text is obligating, at least on a minimal level. It's like the Noahide laws, the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, right? So from our perspective, there are 7 laws that we think that the Torah obligates even non-Jews to. Okay, but like the Hindu in Sri Lanka doesn't care that it says that in the book of Genesis, right? So we think they're obligated, but that doesn't mean that they're going to think they're obligated because it's coming from the very text from which we extend our own obligation, right? Are there no Hindus in Sri Lanka? Buddha? So certainly no Hindu in Sri Lanka is going to feel obligated over that. But
Joel's been in Sri Lanka.
It's like,
I don't know if anyone else at the table has been.
None of us were going to take issue with the Hindu.
It's like Rothschild and Kazrilivka. Do you know that joke?
May Jacob be healthy and strong. May Jacob be free from pain and suffering. May Jacob feel surrounded by love and light. May Jacob be healthy and strong. May Jacob be free from pain and suffering.
The little shtetl of Kazrilivka is in dire need of some resources, and they got nothing, and they had this great idea that they'll invite Rothschild to come dwell with them in Kazrilivka, because if he comes, it'll bring all this commerce, all this money. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to convince Rothschild to leave the big city to come live in Kazrilivka. So they sent him a message, and they said, Rothschild, please come visit us in Kazrilivka, because we promise you that if you move to Kazrilivka, you will live forever. And Rothschild is taken enough by this invitation that he makes a trip. He brings an entourage, and he shows up in Kazrilivka, and he asks the elders, I'm considering your offer, but tell me, how can you be so sure that if I move to Kazrilivka, I'll live forever? He said, we can assure you, Baron Rothschild, no rich Jew has ever died in Kazrilivka.
Old film story.
Yeah. So no Hindu in Sri Lanka has ever felt obligated by Genesis. Okay. Let's look at the Rashi. Let's see. Alan, do you want to read the Rashi?
Sure.
Take a mic.
לא יימצא בביתכם,
בבתיכם.
מניין לגבולים.
Minayin.
מניין לגבולים.
Right, what does minayin mean?
From where?
From where? It's a technical question both in the Gemara and Rashi. From where do we know this? Minayin. It looks like minyan, a different word. Ligvulin. So he's asking a question, and it's the kind of question where the question presupposes that we know the following rule, and the question is, how do we know that rule? Okay? So what's the question?
All right. For what source do we know? Here it says that the prohibition extends to 11 found within your borders.
Right. As opposed to what?
I suppose.
Only in the house.
Only in the house.
Not in the
right?
house.
If the verse says that this machmetzah, this seor cannot be found in your batim, how am I supposed to learn, Penases, which I do learn, I do know from the tradition that's the case, that I'm also not allowed to find, there cannot be chametz, even not in my house, in my office, right? In my garage, in a place that's not my domicile. How do I know that? Since I do know that, I want to know how I know it from the tradition, which is a different question than, is it or is it not the case? It's presuming that that's the case. Talmud Lomar.
Talmud Lomar, B'chol Gevulcha. The Torah says within all your borders.
Right, where does it say that? Look ahead to chapter 13, verse 7. So just paginate ahead. So Alan, read chapter 13, verse 7. Mike.
Okay. Matzot yachel et shiv'at hayamim v'lo yira'eh lecha chametz v'lo yira'eh lecha tza'ar b'chol gevulcha.
Okay, b'chol
gevulecha.
Because it's an etnachta. It's a sopasuk. It's a pausal form, so the gevulcha is extended to gevulecha. Okay.
Okay. So for 7 days, the 7-day period, you shall eat matzah.
Right, technically it's a passive verb, so matzah will be eaten. All the verbs in this pasuk are passive. Matzah will be eaten. What's that? What?
He was reading verse 6.
I was reading verse 6.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. I'll be all right. Matzot will be eaten will be eaten through the 7 days, and you will not find or see. Yira'eh would literally be see. Will not find chametz.
Again, a passive nifal verb. Chametz will not be found. Similar to what Rebecca said before. Will not be seen is a way of saying won't be there. Right? Okay. Not because it's hidden from you. Right? Although we do hide our chametz. Right? Like halachically, we actually make it so that it is there but we can't find it, even though clearly the intent of the verse is not just that you hide it well, right? And in fact, the obligation is referred to as bal yira'eh and bal yimatzeh, lest it be seen, lest it be found, okay?
And it will not be seen or found in
seor,
in your possession, in all of your borders.
Right, and kind of any place you might be. Uncle translates it as tchumin, I think. All tchumecha, all of your zones, all of the regions in which you might find yourself, right? So in verse 13 of the next chapter, there's a clarification that neither chametz nor seor can be found, can be visible, and does not specify bevatechem, your houses, but your zones, your boundaries. Rashi quotes that from our verse, or in our verse, and says, that's how we know that even though in this verse it only mentions houses, that it expands to anywhere you might be. But then he asks a following question.
Ma talud lomar bevetchem? If so, then why do we say specifically your houses?
Right, so flesh out the question. What's the logic he's going on such that this is now a question which also needs answering, which is a very rabbinic model. You ask a question, the answer resolves something, but based on that resolution, it opens up another question. You have to keep following it until all the doors get closed or open, depending on how you want to think of the metaphor.
But then you talk your borders and your houses, it's all encompassing.
But what's the question?
So the question says, it already says it's going to be in your houses. It says, why does it say within your borders? Why do you need both?
Reverse. Well, why do we need both? But the reverse question, Norm.
Since we're going to be told you can't have chametz any place in your boundaries, that includes any place in your home, right, in your house. So why do they specifically mention house? Das is the kasha.
Right, and the presumption is that if it mentions house...
Can't have kasha either.
What?
Can't have kasha either.
And so yeah, varnishes. I wonder, how many hours a week does Joel prepare for the puns that
for the possibilities
come out mellifluously from his
Some
mouth?
say it's genetic.
Yes. So, and if there ought not be a reason to mention Batechem because the data is known, because your gvulim include your houses, the presumption is what? There's got to be a reason. We've got to be learning something from it. So what's the rule? I get the rule where we learn gvulim. Then what rule am I learning from the presence of the word Batechem? It can't just be that it says it. In Midrash Halacha, it can't just be that it says it. There's got to be a rule. So what is the rule we learn from Batechem? Go ahead. Oh, you want to try to guess it, Sue?
Oh, no.
Oh.
Never mind.
You could be like Karnak. You could try to give the answer, and we'll see if it's the right question.
I thought you were going to say it's more like Rosanna. Oh, never
mind. Okay.
All this talk I hear about Soviet Jewry.
Yes.
I think he's alluding to the fact that there might be something that seems like it's in your house but is not under your control. So, for example, when we sell our chametz, after first putting all of it in a cabinet with a ribbon so that nobody's going to open it during Pesach,
Or tape.
or some other,
or electric fence.
The point is, we've excluded that from our control, and that belongs to the person who buys the chametz. And so it's okay that it's in there because it's not ours, and it's not under our control.
That means it would not be in your domain, even though it's still in the house. It's not yours, it's now owned by a non-Jew, and therefore...
Just like Beverly Hills is completely surrounded by Los Angeles, or Beverly Hills and West Hollywood are, so also that chametz that's in that cabinet is completely surrounded by our home, but it's a separate place.
So we're in the right vul to how he's going to answer it. Okay, pun intended. Thank you for laughing. Okay, Alan. So
okay.
Rashi's answer.
Ma beitcha v'irshutcha.
Birshutcha.
Is there a dagesh in that bit?
There's a chirik. Birshutcha.
Okay, there's no chirik inside here. It says
beer. Something else you can't have. Beer.
Oh, beer.
Just keep going.
To teach us that just as your house is in your domain.
What does that mean? He's saying a lot in those three words. Just as your house is in your possession, meaning what? Even if it seems obvious, say it out.
Well, you have control over it.
Just as the phrase "buy it," like denotes that it's not just a place where you live, but anything in it you own. Also, go ahead.
Okay. Af gevilcha shebeshutecha, so that the prohibition against the possession of chametz in your borders
only applies
applies only to chametz that is in your domain.
Only chametz that's out of your house, that is somehow in a reshut that you have some ownership over, just as is the case, as is like against what you would say, Norm, everything in your house. Right? It's not saying that that cabinet that you closed up is no longer in your reshut. It's a legal fiction that we permit, but that's not what he's saying. He's saying that since everything in your house is in your ba'alut, in your ownership, that applies also to your gvulim, where if you own a storage unit, and it belongs to you in the same way that your house belongs to you, you can't have chametz there, right? And again, try not to think too much about how this plays out in practical halacha, because there's a difference. But if you, he'll give some examples, but if there's some chametz that you might come upon outside your house, but not in a place, you're allowed to walk through a supermarket on Pesach, right? You can walk through Ralph's, the Blessed Memory, right, on Pesach, and walk by chametz, and it doesn't violate Bal Yei Ra'eh, it shall not be seen, Bal Yimetzeh, because yes, it's in your gvulim, but you don't own it. You have no ownership to it. You haven't violated anything. So he'll say that outside or inside.
Okay. We did it. This is Yetzeh.
Oh, Yatzah, right.
Yatzah Chenso Shal Nochri Shehu Etzel Yisrael.
Keep going. V'lo kibel.
V'lo kibel alav achriyut.
So I forgot. He gives the opposite example. So let's read it out. What does Yatzah mean technically here? Excludes. Excluding, right? Excluding, therefore, the following category. And what's the category, Alan?
It would be the chametz of a non-Jew, a nochri.
Shehu Etzel Yisrael.
Shehu Etzel Yisrael.
Right, so what would be the case?
Who is a non-Jew who is with a Jew.
Well,
that he puts it, that he gives it a Jew for safekeeping.
Okay, so let's say a non-Jewish person leaves some chametz in your house, but has not given it to you. You don't own it. It's in your house, right? It's in your house, but it's not in your achrayut, not your balut. You do not violate anything by casting your eyes upon it. Okay? This is kind of, I suppose this is a version of our locking away the chametz that we've sold to Hector, right? It says once we've sold it to Hector, it might be in our home, but we don't own it anymore, and we lock it away so you don't see it, but even though it's in our houses, we haven't violated it because we have divested from it, okay?
There's a very interesting comment here. It says that it's the chametz that's been deposited with a Jew, but for which the Jew has not accepted responsibility in case of theft and loss.
Right, achrayut means it has a technical valence here, correct.
So it's like it's a shomer chinam.
Right. Define the term.
It's someone who is not being paid for. It's just an unpaid, not taking any responsibility for anything.
Not taking formal payback responsibility. You're taking there's no lien against your property as a result of it.
Right, but the other is if you're actually paid for it, there's much more stringent responsibilities of what your loss may be if you're getting paid to do the job. Excuse me?
Bailey?
That's right. You're a Bailey, whether you're paid, free, or paid. Shomer chinam. I forgot what the accent is. Shomer schar.
Schar. Or schar. Yeah. Hi, Norm.
So does this mean that if somebody during Pesach, a crazed alcoholic, comes into my home, goes to the liquor cabinet, opens, undoes the bow or whatever, and opens it and steals the liquor and leaves, nobody can file a claim with insurance because it wasn't ours, so we can't complain to the insurance company, and presumably Hector or whomever also does not have insurance on property that's located over there.
I mean, it's an alchemy of modern insurance law and rabbinic law, but halakha would say that Hector certainly has a claim on that.
Okay.
Hector, if anyone don't know what Austin, Hector is a member of our staff, not who's the purchaser of our chametz. It's not a random event. He has full. He has full claim to it under a legal system that he doesn't feel obligated to, but he has full claim to it from our perspective.
It could just be a babysitter too.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
I have a question.
Oh yes, Marshall, microphone. Oh, the mics are hot today. Huh?
If we go back to the prior verse, where there's the description of the ger and the Ezra Haaretz. So these are people who are apparently identified with the community to be bound by their strictures or obligations. And so therefore, when it came to a B'vat Eichem, and that's the question is, what if this person is in your home, but he's not a part of that community? So that's where I think the whole thing of the Nochri comes in here.
Good clarification, Marshall. Thank you for that. Okay, Alan, you're up for another Rashi?
Sure. I did so well on the first. Patience. All right. Ki chol ochel machmetzet. For whoever eats leavening, la'anosh karet al ha'seor. This has the punishment of karet, of excommunication.
Right, and the force of the sentence is this is coming to extend the threat of punishment of karet, not only to chametz, but seor, right? Not only to the stuff that seor helps make, but the seor itself.
Yeah.
And he's going to ask the question.
V'halo kvar anash al chametz. We already talked about this, about that karet is the punishment for eating chametz.
Right, and the presumption in Rashi's terse comment is, could we not have naturally extrapolated? Like, why do we need both? Like, isn't it obvious that if you can't eat and you're punished by chametz, that the same would be applied to the thing that produces chametz? And he's going to say, not necessarily obvious.
Yeah. Ela shalot amar. Let's see. Chametz shera'ui la'achila onesh alav.
Anash alav.
Anash alav.
Keep reading. Seor
she'eino ra'ui la'achila.
Keep going.
Ve'im anash. Lo ya'anosh alav.
Okay, period. So shalot to that you not make the following argument, which would be the wrong argument. What's the argument that Rashi says the Torah is making sure we don't make?
The differentiation between chametz and leavening.
Based on what? Edibility, yes. Right? Lest you make the argument, which would be wrong, that chametz, which is a foodstuff, that's the thing for which consuming it gets the punishment of karet. But seor, which is something that you make food with, but is not a foodstuff, you might have thought, well, if I eat that, it's not the same thing as actually eating chametz, because actually not chametz, it's just produces chametz, maybe I won't be cut off for it. The answer is, yes, you will. Right? And the question is only about the punishment. Rashi is not saying you might make the argument that it's okay to eat it. Rashi is saying you might make the argument that if I eat it, I'm not culpable for the worst punishment. Yes, you are. And that's why the Torah has to reinforce it. Go ahead.
Ve'im anash al seor, v'lo anash al ha'chametz.
And before you translate it, what's the obvious part 2 of this argument? Right. I've now proved why. Rashi showed that if only chametz had been punishable by karet explicitly, I might not have assumed that Seor was. I now have to make God's argument. What if the Torah had just said Seor was punishable by karet if you eat it? Would it not be a kal v'chomer and a natural expansion to apply to chametz? He's going to say no. You need both. Go ahead.
Hayiti omer, if I would happen, I would have said Seor shehu b'chametz acharim.
Mechametz acherim.
Mechametz acherim. Seor is the leaven, which it creates other things for the food itself.
Right. So I might have made the argument. The first argument was, well, chametz is the actual stuff, and that's why the punishment is so severe. Seor is not the stuff, it's just the stuff that makes the stuff, so maybe I would not have expanded it. But you could make the reverse argument logically. Seor is so powerful, it can produce chametz. So I might have thought that that's the apex of the punishment. The thing that's produced from Seor, I might have made the argument, would have been wrong, that it's slightly lower down, because it can't, like chametz can't make chametz, only Seor can make chametz. I might have thought if I eat that by accident, not by accident, intentional, that I wouldn't get karet. The answer is yes, I would. Chametz she'enu mechametz.
Chametz she'enu mechametz acherim lachach.
Lo.
Right. Oh. Lo ya'ana shalav.
I might have said that.
Lachen.
Right? I might have said that. Translate that out. I might have said what? That chametz.
Because chametz doesn't leaven other things.
Which chametz, which does not have the power to make other things leaven, I might have thought you would not be punished with karet over it. Lachach.
Lachach. And therefore we say both the punishments are included.
Right. In Talmudic argument, this is called a lo tzricha argument, right? That it turns out, no, the argument that you might have said is incorrect. That's the lo tzricha. Therefore, this second thing is needed to teach both sides of an argument, because you can't infer A from B, nor can you infer B from A. And the reason why it's such important rabbinic thinking is that rabbinic thinking is all about inferences. There are situations where we do have kal v'chomer, right? What is it called? A fortiori, right? That normally we do say that if I can naturally extrapolate from this case to that case, I wouldn't need both. But some things you think are extrapolatable, I don't know if that's a word, but we're actually saying you would not necessarily have extrapolated, therefore both things have to be mentioned explicitly. Elon.
A little bit off topic, but there was no good time to ask. So it's something that we haven't really covered, and it's been bothering me since we started talking about the punishment for having leaven in your house and the harshness of it, right? And it seems to me like, I get it, you want people to observe the law, but this is like a misdemeanor. Find the guy and make him do 100 hours of community service. I mean, this is it's very disturbing to me that for having chametz in your house, you're banned from the community.
Yeah. As was said before, it's unclear if this verse is applying the punishment of karet, whatever it is, to the finding or to the eating, even though they're both mentioned in the same verse. It may be that the applying of the punishment is only for the eating, not the finding, but even so your question obtains, right? Either we're overstating how severe karet is, or we're understating how problematic chametz is, right? Because if it's a really severe punishment, then there's something nuclear and toxic and third rail about the substance that is kind of been lost to us, because we think of it as food stuff. We shouldn't be eating on Pesach, right? And shouldn't get the death penalty, and this is thought of as worse than the death penalty. So it's a worthy question, and exposes how little we really understand what karet is, where it comes from, who administers it, and why. I don't know.
What does the rabbis take? I mean, are they comfortable with the death penalty or worse? I mean, is it like, well, it says it, or does it trouble anyone say, wow, boy, this is pretty harsh for what seems like I don't know, maybe not a minor crime, but certainly not something that rises to the level of adultery or murder or many other things, right?
Right. Remember that by the time the rabbis are coming to deal with this material, they're already, for the most part, living in a post-Sanhedrin world, which means that a certain amount of their deliberation and pontification about the implication of this is theoretical, and they're aware of it. Even if they don't admit they're aware of it, they're aware of it, right? Because, first of all, they don't presume that they could impose karet anyway. It's from God. So you can have as many arguments as you want as to who's going to get it. It's out of our hands. And even when it comes to midat beit din, right, there's enormous amount of material in Masechet Sanhedrin about how the 4 death penalties were administered, but it seems to be 99.9999999% theoretical. Right? The Talmud has its own line that even when the Sanhedrin did stand, that the Sanhedrin who put one person to death, 100 years, was considered a bloody Sanhedrin. As a way of suggesting that it just wasn't really happening. Hold on, there were a bunch of hands that were up. So Tova, Rachel's holding a mic.
Alan had handed it to me while Elon was speaking.
He's regretting it now.
Sure he is. I'm having trouble with the concept of Seor.
Okay.
Because, like, sourdough starter, would that be hametz or Seor? And most fermented foods are fermented with the yeast that grows on the plant, whether you're making sauerkraut or beer or bread or wine. They didn't buy the little tear-off foil packets. It was the yeast that grows on the plant. And a corollary question is, are there other kinds of Seor in addition to yeast?
Right, well, I think we didn't mention this last time. For the rabbis, the biggest chametz, the most powerful chametz agent is what? Time.
Oh, right.
Right, now, I don't know if they understood the science the way we did. I don't know if they understood about yeast spores out there, but it's about time. Because the idea is that even if you have flour and water, you don't need to add any, correct, you don't need any yeast for there to be either fermentation on a scientific level or chibutzification on a halachic level, right? You said something else I wanted to respond to. What would sourdough starter be thought of? I think it would be sort of as Seor, right? It's a generally non-edible food, right, that is used to make other chametz. And what it is a long extended combination of flour and water, maybe with a fermenting agent as well, right? In fact, one of the footnotes on my version of Rashi, on the word Seor, which I believe it was in our verse that the first time Seor is used, it says, Isa shenichmetza bioter, overly fermented dough, umeshameshet lachmitz ba isot achirot, and it's used to ferment other doughs, al yedei eruv ma'at mimenu b'tochan, by means of combining a small amount of it with other dough. That sounds like starter to me, and that's how Seor is being defined. Yeah. Okay. We got the mic. And then Tova, and then Rebecca, and then Paul.
Possession is 9/10 of the law.
Yes.
Just reference to the death penalty component of what's taking place. The rabbis go out of their way to make it next to impossible to impose the death penalty. And there's a line, I think it's from Pirkei Avot, but I'm not sure. It says, if it was done every 7 years, it would be a murderous beit din. If it was done once every 70 years, it would be a murderous beit din. But if these two rabbis were on it, they would never impose the death penalty at all.
Yeah.
So it is the requirements of having been warned beforehand, having two witnesses being able to testify, that even, give the example that even if you if you kill someone and you're standing over the dead body and no one has seen you do actually do it, you can't impose the death penalty.
There's a many thousand-year-old tradition of a rabbinic urge to soften with that which would be a draconian and also logical application of the law, right? In the 8th chapter of Sanhedrin, which basically reduces Ben Sorer Mored, the rebellious child, to also a situation that can never actually be adjudicated, right? The rabbis cannot say those psukim from Parshat Ki Titzi are irrelevant. They can't say that, but they can legalize it into a de minimis, right? There's an apocryphal story. I'm sure something similar may have happened, but I learned it as a story in the yeshiva world, where I just told the story recently. Maybe this. Okay, I thought it here. So if this is redundant, I apologize. But I learned when I was yeshiva that a woman who was Baal Tshuva and now living in the Frum community, getting married. She finds her yeshiva bacher b'shir, and they're working on the language of the ketubah. And when it comes to the language of the ketubah, the word betula, which means virgin, is there. And she sheepishly tells her rabbi, I wasn't always frum, right? Amevin yavin. And she's concerned about the implication of having a ketubah, which is read out loud, and in the frum wedding, people know what the words mean, not have the word betulta in the ketubah. So it's a way of kind of like advertising the entire wedding that she had a less than chaste past. And the story is that the rabbi said to her, were there witnesses? Which seems like an invasive question. It's actually a kind question, right? Because if there were no witnesses, then halachically you're a betulta. Because I'm not going to embarrass you publicly based on this. I find a legal way to say, is there halachic proof besides your own admission, and you can't self-incriminate to you're not being betulta? No? Okay, so your ketubah says betulta. And any wedding that I do, by the way, independent of the domestic arrangement before the wedding, is a betulta for that very divorce. What's that? Except for divorce, right? And a convert. There are different languages. There's giorta, there's armalata, she's a widow, but I don't just take the word betulta out, even if the couple has had yichud before. What do I know? Tova.
Going back to Elon's question about karet, we seem to be and Rashi seems to be seeing karet as cut off, one permanently and perhaps meaning by death, I mean literally severed, but later, halakhically or rabbinically, karet is used as a punishment, as effectively we're shunning, right? Like in Amsterdam, when Sephard, Minchad Sephard butchers were selling their meat to Ashkenazim, the community imposed, I thought it was karet, maybe I'm... Was it? Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. It was harem.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the relationship between those?
Chera means forbidden.
Right.
Like haram in Arabic as well, and it became a tool by which the kahal, the society, could put someone on the outs, sometimes either as a punishment or to pressure them to get to their wife. Right. And it was imposable, but it wasn't saying anything on a cosmic level about their soul's relationship with Am Yisrael. I think throughout rabbinic literature, there's a notion that whatever karet is, we don't have the power to impose it. Yeah. Paul's hand was up, and then Sandy. Paul, thanks for waiting.
Rabbi, this grammar here is the root. This what they're translating "not fit for eating." Is that Resh Aleph Hey? Is it like vision under Rashi?
Ra'ui, good. So Rashi used the word ra'ui. In Hebrew, ra'ui is built from the word ro'eh, to see, but it means appropriate, worthy of, and there's probably a linkage between the root to see something, like visibility and appropriateness. But here it simply means Sa'or she'enu ra'ui la'achila. It is it's a food. It's a substance that is not, I mean, edible would be the right word in English, but literally fit for eating. Good. Here it means fit, but you're right. It is built from the root that means seen. I don't know if you can do that in an English idiom and have it make sense. Someone can come up with it. Sometimes the idioms translate, sometimes they don't.
It ought not to be seen to be eaten.
Self-eating that. It's something like that. I can't see it being edible. Seemly. Maybe seemly. Yeah. Okay. Sandy.
Since we're off on a Sanhedrin tangent.
Yes.
What did they do? Like if someone was wanted murder, someone just goes on a rampage or whatever, what punishments were available if they weren't imposing the death penalty?
Yeah. What's the joke about the British policemen, right, before they carried guns? Stop! Or I'll say stop again! Right? So I don't know. I don't know what powers of coercion they had. I mean, did they have jails? I don't even know. There is a school of thought of first, second, third century, Jewish history that a significant amount of the civilization that the rabbis write about, legislate about, reminisce about for the time, is a version of a figment of their imagination. Right? There is some school of thought. There's also a school of thought that says that's not true. That the whole notion that there was really a society for hundreds of years governed by a Sanhedrin that was imposing a theocratic, it's called what it is, law, that it may not really even have existed. It certainly didn't exist by the time the rabbis were in charge. It may not even have existed before that, and that we read the Talmud, we're inside of it, and Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yechud, Rabbi Chanina, and it sounds like it was an entire world, and it may have just been them. Right? So I don't know. I don't know if you plot yourself back in the Hasmonean era. They were pretty religious zealots, right? What actually would have happened had you violated Shabbat in public? I don't know. But it's a good and worthy question. It's a Ra'ui question. Okay. Alan, finish off the Rashi. Looks like we're not going to get to verse 21 today. Or 20 today.
We didn't. I thought I finished the Rashi.
There's one more Rashi. But Ger ube'ezrach ha'aretz.
Hang on. I got to make sure I'm on the right. 19. Bager be'ezrach ha'aretz. This is.
This applies also
to the convert and the
resident alien.
Alien?
I mean, the ger in context doesn't mean a convert, but resident alien might be better, like someone who's living amongst you under your aegis, but is not part of your clan or your religious community.
Okay. Lefi shahanes ma'aseh Yisrael. Since that is because that the miracle was performed for all of Israel.
What's implied before the word Israel? Since the miracle was performed only, right? You might have thought that since the beneficiaries of this miracle, that this whole celebration observing, was just done for us, Benesses, we know that an Erev Rav comes out, but it wasn't performed for them. You might have thought that certainly the severity of the restrictions would not apply to the people who happen to live among you, but are not inheritors of the benefits of this miracle. Therefore,
Hutzrach lerabot et hagerim, that it was required, there was a need to include the gerim expressly.
Right, there was a need for the text to include it expressly, because the truth is they are obligated to that, but you might have thought they weren't, because if they go backwards up their line, they don't get to an ancestor who was part of the miracle, right? It's an interesting thing that happens when we do modern Gerut, right? A modern convert is said that they have no yichus, they have no ancestry, right? So it's actually really interesting when you have a patrilineal Jew who converts, right? If their father was a Kohen or Levi, it doesn't matter, halakhically, even in a community where Kohen Levi matters more than it does in some communities, because they gain new yichus, and the yichus is Avram and Sarah, not that their religious yichus is not their parents, right? But we say that a convert can make references in the liturgy to our ancestors. They acquire our ancestors, even though they weren't actually their individual ancestors. They did not stand at Sinai, but we say that they did stand at Sinai. You might have thought that a ger and a zrach aretz who in the Torah is not what a ger is today, since we're not saying they stood at Sinai. They were not, slaves in Egypt. Therefore, these restrictions shouldn't apply to them. They do apply to them, and that's why the Torah mentioned it, because you wouldn't have assumed it. Joel and then Marshall, and we'll probably end.
Well, he could have said just the opposite. He could have said, why is the ger included? Because they are a rav. That the ger that was in their midst at that time also died.
Correct, you could have said that. And listen, the Torah could have said something else. The Torah could have said it doesn't apply to them. Because they weren't, right? Like, we've got as testimony the Torah's law, and now Rashi has to figure out why it's included. Right, it could have been a different answer. Marshall?
Yeah, so it's the proof text, which I find interesting here. It says, Kiva etzem hayom hazeh hotzeti et tzivotechem le'eretz Mitzrayim.
Say that in English.
Because on that very day, I have taken out your tzvaot,
your hordes
from the land of Egypt. Therefore, hutzrach the rabot hagerim shelo hutz'u mitzrayim.
Yeah.
Therefore, it was necessary to specifically make a reference here to the gerim, the aliens or resident aliens who were not in Egypt.
Right, and even to your point, Joel, right? The Torah is thinking about a time in the future where there'll be resident aliens among you, not descendants necessarily of the Erev Rav, but just people who happen to come into your camp and live under your general authority. Should we quickly just read verse 20? Why not? Marshall, you have the mic. Read verse 20. You had the mic. You surrendered it. Take it back.
Verse 20.
Give Marshall mic.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Kol machmetzet lo tochelu b'chol moshvotechem tochelu matzot. You shall eat nothing leavened. In all your settlements you shall eat unleavened bread.
So, just spoiler alert, what Rashi is going to say is normally in our way of thinking about rules, we would tell someone what they're not allowed to do, and then we would tell them the punishment for doing it. This is reverse. The punishment for having any seor in or eating any seor is this. You should not eat any seor, right? The warning that thou shalt not for the seor comes after the description of the punishment for it. So we'll get into that when we meet next time, which is July 16th. Stay on the WhatsApp chat. Austin, if you want to join the WhatsApp chat, because when I'm not here, someone who's not, they might be on Zoom. Leonard hosts a WhatsApp, a Zoom learning for somewhere else. That's in still in Breshit, right? Yeah. I'll see some of you in Poland, and happy Wednesday, everybody. I'll miss this.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.